Hello and welcome to Connected, episode 197. It's brought to you this week by Squarespace, Pingdom, and Casper. I'm your host, Stephen Hackett, and I am not on stage this week with my co-host. We are all back in our homes, recording alone, staring into the soulless eyes of our computers. I'm joined, of course, by Federico Vitici.
What do you mean? I'm recording in front of my neighbors. I have an audience. Everybody's looking at me. The whole building. I was like, I cannot do shows by myself anymore, so you guys should come and watch. It's kind of creepy, but it gets the job done.
And Myke Hurley, how are you?
I don't like this introduction. I like it when the introduction is so loud that you have to bring the volume down in the... I actually... Wait, this is something we spoke about. So the cheers, which were incredible, I definitely got the energy on our live episode last week. They were so loud when me and Federico came on that Stephen had to duck the audio. I still want the raw audio. Like, I wasn't joking. I want to hear how loud it was again and again and again. So it was great. There are very few things in my professional career that when I'm finished with them, I feel like, oh, that was perfect. Last week's show was perfect. So thank you to everyone who came out. Thank you to everyone who's listened to it. It was an incredible episode. I loved it so much.
It was a lot of fun, and if you haven't listened, you totally should. But at the end of the show, we announced a couple of things. We are going to be taking the show on the road this fall. We'll be in Chicago with Upgrade on Monday, October 22nd. That has sold out, but there's a wait list, so you could hop on the wait list and see how that goes. And then we'll be doing Connected in New York on Thursday, October 25th. And as my speaking this word out loud right now into my microphone, there are a few tickets left. And so if you're interested in coming to see us in New York, I would definitely click on that link. Those links will be in the show notes this week for your clicking pleasure. The Relay Road Trip is what Jeremy's calling it in the chat room. I like that.
That is nice, actually.
Relay Road Trip.
We should have come up with that name, to be honest.
That's really pretty good. Yeah.
Yep. Gosh darn it.
Yeah. So we have a little follow up. I wanted to point people to an interview I did with Greg from Smile. Smile, of course, everyone knows from Tech Expander and PDF Pen. They sponsored a bunch of shows here on the network, but I was able to sit down with Greg and do an interview because their company is turned 15 years old this week. And
wow.
I think that's a heck of an achievement. We're talking about some of their early software. Guys, they had software for like making labels for like DVDs and for faxing, like all sorts of crazy
You're the
stuff.
only customer left, right?
of the disc making software?
Yeah, and the labels and the printing and all that.
Yeah, they took it off for sale and I said, "Hey man, you got to get me a copy because I need it.
I need to archive that." I was thinking about this because I read this interview, and one, I love Smile. Smile have been a supporter of Relay FM since the very beginning of it. Like, they took a chance on us, like, before we were even a thing. The other is, I really like the idea of a company turning 15 years old. It just makes me feel better about my own company, right? Like, oh, okay, we're about to turn 4. Maybe we can make it to 15. Like, that feels like a good thing. So I appreciate knowing this information.
Yeah, I can relate to that, especially because MacStories is going to be 10 next year.
That's not possible.
Yes, it is possible.
No, it's not possible. How did you do that?
Well, the time goes
old?
on.
Are you old like Steven?
No, I started...
I was going to say, our websites differ in age only by a year.
Yeah, but
512 will be 10 this
year.
year.
The difference is in spirit, Steven. we talked about this before. So yeah, I started when I was when I was 12, basically, and now I'm 22. So everybody knows. Everybody knows that.
I was 67. This is retirement age blogger.
I love that you're just leaning into it at this point.
It was Steven's retirement idea. It's like, I got all this spare
I should
time.
be a blogger now.
What else am I gonna do?
And all these labels that I've been printing.
I may as well just do something with all these Macs I've been accumulating over the last 30 years.
Oh boy, man.
So you were saying, Smile, the interview.
Yeah, so I was happy how it turned out. I think it was really interesting to talk to them about the evolution of, if you think about it, really everything, right? Like they started when it was just the Mac. OS X was very new, and they sort of took a chance on OS X, and it paid off. But now they're, of course, on iOS. And like we talked about them buying Text Expander. That's something that was an acquisition for them. And the transformation of that into a cloud sort of like 21st century service. It was really interesting, and I enjoyed being able to do it. So I owe a big thanks to Smile for letting me talk to them and being. I think if you read through the questions, like they just kind of lay it all out there. We talked about they tried for a while putting some of their software in like retail stores, like Apple retail stores, and like they had like boxes designed and printed, and like that didn't do very well. And we kind of talked about that, so it was fun to kind of get the story from a couple different sides.
Anytime you can get some history, you'll take it.
That's right. It's true. So speaking of history...
Hold on a second before you move on. There was a thing in my notes which relates to you.
No. Here we go again.
I was advised by Michael last week to thank listener Austin, who came to the live show at WWDC. And can you tell Mike the story of what happened with Austin and the live show?
So we bumped into Austin first at ATP, and Austin had a gift for us, but we would not accept the gift until Stephen was there. Austin brought with him the Logitech mouse manual that we spoke about many weeks ago when we were talking about the Logitech Crayon, and Stephen got very excited about this really old mouse manual that he found on eBay. And Austin bought that and brought it with us, and now Stephen has the manual, and me and Federico each have a floppy disk.
So listener Austin, thank you for doing that, and especially for the floppy disk. I know that Stephen was really happy. I have a bunch of photos of Stephen being really excited to put his hands on that really old book. And
I can do even better. He gave it to me. You guys want to hear it?
Yeah, please. That's what. Have you read it yet?
Even the pages sound old. So, thank you, Austin, and I'm really happy that you're happy, Stephen.
Yeah, I'm up to the chapter, the point and click, trademark, shell for Lotus 123, trademark. So,
awesome.
It's coming right along.
Sounds great.
Really, really hot stuff. So you can move on.
Yes. So speaking of history, let's talk about the Workflow app. We have what may be the best use of Workflow yet, and it is put together really the art of emoji and the science of the Tichy scale into something that quite honestly, I think it could change my entire outlook about the iPad. I think I could work on iOS now because of this workflow. So one of you guys want to walk us through what this workflow does?
So this was created by Rosemary Orchard and Matt Casanelli. If you install this workflow upon your device, at any point you will be able to invoke the Tichy scale. So you will be able to tweet with your how you feel something ranks upon the Tichy scale. It gives you the option to choose which of the areas you want to be pointing towards. So maybe you think something's nightmare or good plus, and then it will spit out an emojified version of the Tichy scale for you, so you can rank things whenever you please. It is stupendous.
Yeah, and it's a really great way to have instant access to one of the greatest, types of measurements
of all time.
I mean, one day we will look back, names such as Copernicus or Galileo Galilei, and then we're also the Tichy scale up there, the Tichy scale system, one of the greatest revolutions of our time.
It's the only true way to understand how much you love something or feel about something.
It's a scientific way to grade your love or hate for something. So.
Yeah. Mm-hmm. Well, if you think about it, it's all love, really. If you think about it, it's just something like you have to have negative love and positive love.
Exactly. Yes. Let's retire the word hate and use negative love instead. So.
Oh boy.
So now there's a workflow for that, or a shortcut soon enough.
Yeah.
Mhm.
Oh man, can you imagine that you'd be
Mhm.
able to just activate this thing by voice?
You can,
I don't know how
you can,
that would
like-
work, but maybe we'll
Mhm.
find out later on in the show. I have one last piece of follow-up that I wanted to mention before we move on today. Apple has clarified emoji use in app review guidelines, so they've updated the app review guidelines. Remember, we were talking about this a bunch. We had Jeremy Burge on the show to talk about when apps were getting rejected for using emoji. Well, Apple has clarified it to say apps may use Unicode characters that render as Apple emojis, they use an S, which is interesting, in their app and app metadata. Apple emojis may not be used on other platforms or embedded directly in your app binary. So basically, you can use emoji if it's in Unicode text form only. You cannot use any images of them, which is by and large what we had expected, but this clarifies it. You can use emoji if you're rendering them as text. You cannot use Apple's emoji as images. So it is done now. Everybody knows.
That makes sense. I mean, it seems fair, right? I don't think this is something to be upset about.
No, it's not. But I think that it was getting confusing for a while because there were a bunch of things that seemed to be being removed from the store that didn't need to be, and maybe Apple internally needed to actually clarify it for themselves as well. And now that's been done, so people know how they can move on, which I think is great. So should we take our first break? And then it's time to talk about all of my plans for reviewing watchOS over the summer.
Perfect. I thought you were doing tvOS.
Well, both.
Change your
actually.
mind?
I'm going to stretch myself
my
out and do
God.
both of them because
Okay.
someone's going to pick up the slack. This episode of Connected is brought to you by Squarespace. Make your next move with Squarespace because with the ability to grab a unique domain name, take advantage of award-winning templates, and so much more, they will let you easily create the website that you want for your next idea or project. No matter what type of website you're looking to build, they are the only one platform that will let you do it. Squarespace has functionality for all types of websites. You can add online stores, you can add blogs, you can add galleries for portfolios, you can add map blocks, so you can have if say you have a restaurant, you want to invite people to your restaurant, you can say, hey, here it is. They have all of that stuff. It's all built in. You can very quickly add and integrate with a bunch of other services, like if you want to set up an email newsletter or you want to have a form that can be filled out, it can all go into Google Sheets. There's so much amazing information and stuff available to you on their they have lots of different forums and support documentation, as well as their 24/7 customer support. Squarespace have everything. They win awards all over the place for their templates and for their customer support because it was all that good. There is nothing to install, patch, or upgrade. Squarespace have got you covered. You don't have to worry about any of that stuff. They take care of it, so you don't have to. You can sign up today at squarespace.com/connected to get a free trial and play around with Squarespace and make a website to your very heart's content. And then when you're ready to put it out to the world, their plans start at just $12 a month. You can sign up right now at squarespace.com/connected and use the code CONNECTED at checkout, and you will get 10% off your first purchase of a website or domain and show your support for this show. That is squarespace.com/connected and the code CONNECTED for 10% off. Our thanks to Squarespace for their support. Squarespace, make your next move, make your next website. So before we get to my review plans for all of the stuff that I'm going to be working on over the summer, what if we just quickly breeze through Federico and Steven's plans, and then we can get to the real meat of the conversation?
Sounds good. Yeah, let's do it.
So, what are you thinking of doing? Federico, are you gonna get in depth again about all of the different NS activities and stuff like that for your iOS review? You're gonna dig right into the code base?
No. So I think we touched upon this briefly a few weeks ago, maybe, and then we've been talking about this in person last week. I've been planning to change my approach to writing iOS reviews because I feel like for the past couple of years I've gone too far on the technical side, and I want to bring my review style back to a more balanced approach of explaining the technical things for sure, but also trying to focus more on the experience of using a new OS, or of what the features mean, not just what the features are made of, if that makes sense. And I feel like I've tried both approaches over the years. I used to do just personal opinion and experience type reviews years ago. Then for the past couple of years, I've tried to give more importance to the technical side, and I feel like I've learned a lot of lessons. And I feel like iOS 12 is the perfect moment to try something that is in the middle of both camps. 12 is really the best time to try something that is shorter. So for the past couple of years, I've published reviews that were, I think, iOS 10, 50,000 words, and iOS 11 was 55,000. That is way too much, and it didn't make me feel... I felt good about the work because it was a reference material for so many people, but it didn't make me feel good doing the work. It was exhausting, it was way too much, and it also made the review not easily accessible for tons of people who don't care about the finest details about the API and the SDK. And I've been thinking a lot about this, of what is it that I enjoy about doing these reviews? And I enjoy discovering all these little things. I enjoy understanding what's going on behind the scenes. But the fact that I enjoy learning that information doesn't mean that it necessarily makes for a good review. Well,
it was good for what it made. So, like, I think last year and the year before, they were good. They were good things. You had a good reference and a good review. But I guess the decision is, do you need to make the reference part?
What I'm trying to say is that I felt in some chapters of the review that I was doing those primarily for me and not for the readers, in the sense that I was doing them because I wanted to have that reference material, which is a noble approach in a way, but also my readers are my priority, not the things that I want, because personally I can just keep some notes. And so I've been thinking a lot about this, of how can I make the review more accessible? How can I balance the technical side and the personal experience side, which is really what I love writing about, of how does a feature or a new design or something that Apple is doing impact me on a daily basis? What's the experience of using the OS? And so I wanted to see what was going to happen in iOS 12. And now that we have iOS 12, I think if you look at the features that Apple is putting out there this year, it's the perfect time to do this kind of approach. We have new notifications, do not disturb, screen time. These are all features that are, basically developers have nothing to do with them. There's no screen time API. There's no, and the notification APIs are basically unchanged. It's more on the user experience side, more on the here's what it means to have these features. And of course, yes, there is shortcuts, which will be the technical part of the review. I will talk about what shortcuts do behind the scenes, but also I think I'm uniquely positioned to talk about what shortcuts actually does, what it means to put together a workflow or custom shortcut in the in the new app. I don't see, and this was also kind of talking to developers last week. This was also the what developers had as an impression of WWDC. There isn't that many technical changes besides shortcuts to adopt this summer. There's a few things. There's shortcuts. There's the SiriKit media stuff. But it's not a highly technical OS as iOS 11 might have been, with all the iPad stuff and the drag and drop and the multitasking. So this is something that I've been thinking about for the past year. I want to make the review more accessible, be shorter, try to be at least under 40,000. But if I can do something in between 30 and 35, I would be really happy with that. And I want to find a better balance between describing technical changes, being, of course, having an in-depth review, being, having tons of screenshots and footnotes and all those details that people love, but also I want to write more of my own thoughts, of my own opinions of what it means to be using a new OS. And so yeah, that's the basic goal that I have in mind for this summer.
Do you expect there to be sections that you'll just straight up not do?
Oh yeah, for
Right.
sure.
Okay.
One of my plans is to, for example, stuff that I'm not really an expert about, like Apple Books. I don't read books. It's one of those things that you say, man, I really should read more books, and then you never do. What I'm planning is we're going to have on the website this summer, sometime in July or August, a few deep dives into the new apps and some features that I will not cover in my review, so that I will have a section of these apps in my review. I will describe my the basic idea of what's new and my the few thoughts that I have about them, and then I'll just say, for a deep dive, you can read this article from someone who knows more about this stuff than me. Just like I did with Swift Playgrounds 3 years ago. It's not that I can learn Swift just to write about Playgrounds in my review. So Apple Books, I think, is a great example. I can talk about it for the limited use that I have of the app, but then I will have someone else write about Apple Books more in depth.
I think that makes sense. I think this is probably good for your health.
Yes, from all types of health, the physical health and mental health. I don't want to go crazy again putting together this review. And ideally, I should be able to get it done in the 2 weeks of writing that I usually set aside for myself in July. Another change, I'm not watching any sessions right now, which is unusual. From especially it's a big change from the past 2 years. I used to come back from WWDC and just download all the sessions and watch all of them, but for the reasons that I mentioned before, of there aren't just that many technical changes in 12, and also I want to use the OS for a month before I start writing about it. So what I'm doing is I'm just getting regular work done. I have iOS 12 on my iPhone, on my iPad. I'm not watching any sessions. I'm just taking notes of things that I notice in normal daily usage. So I'm trying, it's the same approach that I used to have a few years ago. And then I'm sure that I will read through the documentation of, the changes again, such as shortcuts, which I've done this week. So it's not like I will abandon the technical stuff completely, but I need to strike a better balance between these two sides of my reviews. And like I said, I think 12 is a great opportunity to do so this year.
All right. I'm pleased because I think this is going to be, I think, by and large, better for everyone except the people that needed this reference guide. But I think stuff like that can exist in other places. You know, I think that whilst you did a great job, it's not necessarily what you're best at.
No.
I don't think people read your work for reference, but it's, but I guess a lot of people will use it for that if it exists. But there are other places that can do that. I can think of somewhere like Ars Technica, right? I would assume that that's a kind of a thing that they do. But also now, you're saying about this now, you're leaving the door open for other people, right? Like that there is a gap in the market if that's what you want to be, if that's the kind of thing that you're interested in. So, but I'm pleased.
If there's something, and if there's anything you want to write about at Mac Stories, about stuff that I will not cover, please get in touch. I would love to have you write about stuff that I will not be taking care of. So, yes, I'm happy that you're pleased about my decision. We've talked about this a lot last week in person, which was really good to hear from someone else about the things I had in mind. I will, of course, be writing extensively about shortcuts. I'm not sure yet. I think it will be part of the review. I've been considering the idea of having a separate story because it's an app on the, it's that you get from the App Store. But I think overall it will make more sense for me to have it in the review itself. So it'll probably be in there, but otherwise I will be sharing tons of shortcuts on Mac Stories, Club Mac Stories, Unconnected, everywhere. I will be sharing shortcuts everywhere because now Apple has made it official. So I'm also, I don't have a process yet for research and putting together the review. It's something that will circle back here on Connected in a few weeks. Right now, I'm just taking notes in Notes. So not exciting at all. I still don't know if I'll be using Devonthink or Ulysses or Drafts, or I have no idea. I'm just taking notes.
No, that is whenever you decide that, I want to know about that because
we'll
it's
talk about
always
it
interesting to talk about that.
Yeah.
Stephen, are you preparing an army of haikus for your macOS Mojave? Is it Mojave?
Mojave.
I feel like every episode of every show I'm on, I ask this question and can never remember. Mojave. What are you doing for Mojave? Are you actually going to write a review this year? Because I know it's not always something that you do. You sometimes write something small, or whatever. Have you decided what you want to do?
Yeah, I was actually looking through my macOS reviews folder, and I've written one. I wrote a line one for a freelance thing, but since Mountain Lion, I've had one on 5.12, except for Yosemite, which we were having a baby and we had just started this company. And so I actually just wrote like a design review of the new user interface. So if you take that one out of the mix, I've got, 1, 2, 3, 5 of them on the site. And they think the average is like 11,000 words. It's a lot shorter than the opus that Federico has been publishing. But yeah, I intend to do another one. I think it'll be about that length. I have a tendency to just focus on the consumer features side of it and only dip below the surface when I feel like I need to. So my dark theme article, which we're going to talk about in a little while, has some of that. I was like, this is how it's actually working. This is what it's actually doing. But I expect it to be online, with my Sierra or High Sierra review, walking through the features, doing a mix of this is what the feature is and this is what I think of it. I kind of blend those things together in the way that I write my reviews with a bunch of screenshots and stuff. So I expect to do it. I'm running it on an external SSD on my MacBook Pro and have already spent some time in it. I've watched a few sessions, mostly around dark mode. There's actually not a lot of macOS sessions this year at WWDC. There's only a few others that don't pertain directly to dark mode. I think that speaks to sort of the quiet year the Mac is having. I think that will be obviously vastly different next year when these iOS apps start coming to the Mac. And that's really the section that I've been sort of thinking about the most, about dealing with, home news, voice memos, and stocks, these apps that are my stocks, that are built with these new tools and are very clearly, at least in the first beta, sort of broken in places and just weird in others. And I'm trying to decide how heavily I'm going to tread on those apps in the review. I think I'm going to see how much they advance during the beta process. I mean, it's still June. The last couple of releases have been out in September or October, so there's plenty of time. But I need to kind of think about how I'm going to treat those apps and what I want to say about them, because in a way they are proofs of concept, but another way they are shipping in the OS. They're in the dock. They are part of the system. And so figuring out where that line is something I haven't quite done yet, but I'm excited to get into it. I think, like we said on the show last week, I think this version of macOS really is pointed in a direction where the last couple of, maybe since El Cap, macOS releases have kind of just been bumbling around. They're adding stuff here and there, but they didn't really feel like there was this is the direction in which we're marching.
It's been in a kind of
Mojave has that
cryo sleep. It's just been very little has been added over a long period of time, and it just felt this thing is just as it is, and it's going to keep being as it is. But at least now, no matter kind of how you feel about some of the stuff in Mojave, it is Mojave. I still don't know. We spoke about it a minute ago, and I still can't get it right. At least now there is a path that macOS is going to go down, and I think that makes this one uniquely interesting, I think.
am excited to explore that. So I feel like, if anything, this review may have more of that sort of thing in it than previous ones, like the direction the Mac is going in, how I feel about that, sort of the evidence to back up my case. Like, this is where things are going. Like, I have, I meant to write about it before Connected, but it just didn't pan out. But this idea that, like, do these iOS apps, like, I think that furthers the case that the Mac should have a touch interface, because if you use Home on your iPhone and your iPad and then you open on your Mac, like 100% of the time your brain is going to try to reach out and touch it. That's going to be weird, and it's already strange in the beta. Like, oh, I use the mouse with this app and it works fine. Like, it has menus and clicks and like it all works, but visually still it's laid out like a touch app. And some of that sort of stuff I want to explore in the review, and there hasn't been opportunity to do that for a long time. So I'm excited to sort of get philosophical in places where it comes up.
Do you expect a lot of that stuff to change quite significantly over the beta period, or do you reckon those apps are pretty locked in?
I really don't know. Especially Home is easiest to pick on, because Home is out of the 4, it's also the worst iOS app.
Yeah, I was going to say, like, it also sucks badly on iOS.
Not great.
So, like,
and it uses the most iOS conventions. So, like, it has the date picker from iOS in it, which is hot garbage on the Mac. It looks and feels.
I mean, it's not good on iOS. Like, it's, it's a bit clunky.
It's like, oh, do you use a cursor to, like, move this pin? I was like, what are we doing? And it uses a lot of, like, the popovers and stuff that are very iOS, and the others use the same things but to lesser extent. So I really don't know. I hope that they continue to improve them. I didn't mean to get it down this rabbit hole, and I'll pull out after the statement, but how Apple treats these apps is how third-party developers will treat theirs. So if Apple builds these and there's a lot of, like, iOS UI elements in them, then what Apple is saying is Mac apps now use iOS elements. Whether or not they were designed for the Mac first or make any sense with a cursor, this is how Mac apps are now. And I want Apple to make them feel more at home on the Mac. And I'm not saying the Mac shouldn't evolve. The Mac should evolve. The Mac UI has to evolve if it's going to survive. But it doesn't necessarily mean that I want the date picker. And then I was like, it just doesn't work. Like, it's super weird, and it's easy to mess up. And so I'm hoping they make improvements, but I'm not holding my breath at the same time.
So I have some hot reviews coming your way.
What
in
about
a few
you,
months'
Myke?
time. And
What are you going to do?
so as I said before, I'm working on reviews for both watchOS and tvOS. I'm thinking about creating iOS, iBooks author books for both of these, with lots of animations, stuff like that. I'm really going to go in depth about the way that these things work. Very excited to do that. And they're going to be available for $100 each in the iBook store. Wow. Yep, $100 each. So yeah, I'm hard at work on both of those 70,000 word reviews in iBooks author form.
We have some real competition going on here.
Yep. I'm actually taking some time off of all my work.
That makes sense.
Just to work on those books between now and September.
Wow.
I don't think we can compete with that. I think we're done.
Nobody can. I'm changing the game.
It's
so
the animation. The animations in the book. That's your secret. That's the secret sauce, Myke, as the people say.
Yes, this is my secret sauce for what's going to make it worth the $100.
So is it just 100 or 19.99? What's 100? 100.
No. We're being straight with this. It's a cool $100. Cool $100.
That is pretty cool. I mean, like, you're not messing around. You're not saying it's $100, but it's not. You're just going for it.
I'm not going to lie to you about it. Like, there's not going to be like a $200 Pro edition or anything. It's just straight up $100.
What's the process like? Have you been taking notes? Have you been...
No. Do it in one take.
And you type into iBooks Author, which is a fantastic idea to do.
Yeah, the day before. So basically, what I'm gonna do is I'm gonna take a few weeks off just to think. I'm not gonna write it all, and then basically, the day before. So when they announce the dates at the keynote in September, I'll know the dates, and then the day before, I'm gonna sit down and I'm just gonna write 70,000 words.
Wow!
And when I get to 70,000 words, I stop, and then I publish straight to iBooks Author.
Are you
Yep.
gonna write in Markdown? Per rich text, just rich text.
Yeah.
I'm just gonna paste the links in line, if you need not like that, not even because it's all in plain text.
Amazing.
So if you need a link, it's just how much more convenient can it be than if I say go to this link and the link is just there.
You want to see the URL before you click on it, and that's just common sense.
So that's how I'm not gonna catfish you or anything, right? You're gonna just get.
Right.
Wow.
Is that a concern that you have when you're reading stuff online? That people are gonna catfish you with links.
Well, look, at least you'll know with my reviews that can't happen to you. That is a guarantee.
But you're saying things about other people's reviews in that statement.
No, I'm not.
Don't click any links on 512 Pixels. God knows what you'll end up.
I'm just saying, who knows? Again, you don't know, right? But with me, with my style, you 100% know where you're going when you click it. Because you guys, you put these little Easter eggs in there and stuff, right?
Yeah.
I don't have any Easter eggs. Mine are just regular eggs. They're just right there.
Just on the counter for you to see. Pick them up.
Please that you have regular eggs, Myke. That's
no secrets. Just regular eggs in my reviews.
Is there going to be an audiobook version? No. Just plain text in iBooks Author.
I won't have the time. How am I going to do that? I've got to write it,
Yeah. What things are you going to animate if it's just plain text? What's going to be animated?
No. The animations they're going to be in there, right? Just the text is in plain text. That's why I'm using iBooks Author. Because they have all the animations options. Okay,
I'm looking forward to it, Myke. If you ever need an editor.
It's going to be real good. No. I don't want one. Editors just slow you down, man. I'll be done, and then the editor's like, oh, no, you've got to do more. It's like, no, I don't want to do more.
Okay.
So, just go for it,
I'm excited for you. Good luck. Sounds like a really good workflow you got going on there. So we'll follow back on this in September before you take the time off to think.
Yeah, it's gonna be great.
So yeah, very good.
Go think about it. All right, today's show is brought to you by Pingdom, the company who offer uptime monitoring and web performance management. You might be more familiar with Pingdom than you may think because they help keep so many of your favorite sites online. So talk about BuzzFeed, Netflix, Imgur, they are all. And Relay FM are all Pingdom customers. And if you ever go to any of those websites and it's all hunky-dory, it's because Pingdom is there looking after things for us. Because what Pingdom do is they use 70 global test servers to emulate visits to a website. They check its availability as often as every minute. And if something goes wrong, they notify you. And they can notify you in so many different ways, like email, and text message, or via push notifications, or you can choose all of them in case you want to make sure that you've got some kind of triple lockdown mode so you make sure everything's okay. Websites are so sophisticated these days, they're so complicated. It's not just a case of is my website up or down. There are so many little dependencies that can go wrong that can be really important. Stuff like logins or e-commerce checkouts and stuff like that. Pingdom can monitor all of these different interactions to your website and make sure that everything's running as you would want. All Pingdom needs is the URL that you want to monitor and they will take care of the rest. Go to pingdom.com/relayfm right now for a 14-day trial with no credit card required. Then when you sign up, use the code CONNECTED at checkout and you will get 30% off your first invoice. Our thanks to Pingdom for their continued support of this show and Relay FM. So let's bring this thing down to a serious note for a moment because, Federico, you published a wonderful article today featuring lots of interesting little tidbits which are good to see written down somewhere about shortcuts. So we covered some of this in our live episode last week, but there's also some additional information that you found out. It seems like that you've really got your head around this, and you said, I think you said this in the article, you had some very interesting conversations with some developers and stuff over the last week, and it seems like through what you've heard and through digging through what's available, you've got a pretty good handle on what Siri shortcuts are, what the shortcuts app is going to be. So you feeling pretty confident about your information about what's going on with this?
I'm extremely confident about all the things that I put in the story. Yes.
Okay.
Yeah.
So there are a few areas that I wanted to dig into. So people should read the article. But there was kind of like, from reading it, I had some additional questions that I wanted to ask you.
All right. Okay.
And then just through talking about this, we'll touch on a bunch of different areas. I think as well, we need to maybe try and like settle on some naming conventions now. I think we should just go with Siri shortcuts for the ones that are currently in iOS, the simple ones. And then shortcuts app or shortcuts will mean the full application. Does that sound good? Like just as a way to try and give it some kind of consistency.
Wait, so how do you want to say shortcuts app and?
Or just shortcuts is the app. Siri shortcuts are the simple ones, like the little piece of information. What do you want to do?
I don't know. I would say because Siri shortcuts, they're not necessarily Siri ones, even though Apple calls everything Siri. Like if you pull down on Spotlight, the little, are those Siri? Let's call them Siri shortcuts.
Yeah, but that's Siri though, isn't it? Like that's all part of Siri.
Yeah, it's probably part of Siri. So let's call
because I don't get those recommendations because I turn the Siri stuff off.
All right, so let's call them Siri shortcuts and shortcuts. Yeah.
All right, great. How much work do developers really need to do to realistically donate actions to Siri shortcuts and the shortcuts app? Like,
okay.
Do we expect there to be tons and tons of these, or is it going to be so much work that it's going to put people off?
All right, so it depends on a few things. First of all, a shortcut should be donated, which is this horrible word that Apple is using. Donating shortcuts means making it available to the system.
It's like giving it, right?
Giving it to the system. Like I don't
maybe that's
understand
why they didn't choose
donation.
that, because just over and over saying giving it to the system is just very strange.
The good Samaritan developers making donations to the system.
Hey, look, the system is needy. We can help it out by giving it these things. Just get on board.
Yeah. So the first thing to consider is that a shortcut makes sense if it's a repeatable action that is timely, that is not just a one-time deal. So let's say that you're using Todoist and you're saving a to-do for, I need to buy milk tomorrow at 2 p.m. That's not a shortcut because it's one thing that you're doing once. It's very specific. It's not a routine.
You don't know how much milk I buy.
I was going to say. However, let's say that the system discovers that you keep doing that on a regular basis. So Apple is selling the idea of repeatable actions that are based on user routines and habits, something that the system can surface. So with that in mind, the second thing to consider is developers can choose between two different APIs. One of them requires less work, the other requires more work. The simple one is NS user activity. You may be familiar with this because it's already used in a bunch of places. It's the same technology that powers handoff from iOS to iOS or iOS to the Mac and vice versa. And it's the same API that powers results in Spotlight on iOS.
This is one of those super smart things that Apple does, right?
Yeah.
Where they build a new technology based upon something that people should already be using to get other features. So it makes it so much easier for them to get developer adoption. Yep. Because, or even if you've never used it before, you can at least go, well, I'll put it for Siri shortcuts, and then I get all of these other things for free.
Yep. Yeah,
it's
exactly.
very good.
So that's the easy one to implement, but it's also the easy one in practice because all you can do with user activities is you can open an app into a specific screen or a specific piece of content, like a restaurant listing in Yelp. that is a user activity. It's a point of interest inside of an application. The second technology they can use, you may also be familiar with this, is SiriKit, which is the technology that is used for apps up until now to integrate with Siri via voice, to be able to say in things, for example, do this or that. So the same API that powers Siri, and the one that shows you the little custom UI when you ask Siri to send a message or a payment or save a task, can be used to bring up a shortcut. That requires more work from developers, but also Apple is kind of making it easier for everybody to adopt SiriKit, because there's a new custom type of SiriKit integration that developers can use. Until today, SiriKit was organized in domains, which are categories of apps. That was a bit too limiting for types of apps that don't necessarily fall into one bucket or the other. So now Apple is saying, well, everybody can integrate with SiriKit by making a custom integration.
What does that mean?
That means that when you open Xcode, there's a new extension point. When you're creating a SiriKit extension, you can say make it a custom one, and actually you get. I actually have a photo here for reference. You get a list of verbs and actions. It's like a little dictionary that allows you to build your own sort of semantic integration with SiriKit. And for example, you can say...
This was what Marco was asking for on ATP, I think.
Yeah,
right?
So you can do things like the generic section. Under generic, you have do, run, or go. And for example, if you want to make an information type of integration, you can say view or open. If you want to do share, you can do share, post, or send. So this is basically like a little dictionary that tells Siri how to talk about your integration. So that, like, if you want to share a tweet, it'll say, I shared it, instead of saying, I bought it, because it's not like you bought a tweet. It doesn't make sense. So
you can promote tweets, baby.
Sure.
That's how we're going to get them.
So it's a way for developers to make a custom intent that follows a specific set of definitions. I'm not a developer, but just looking at the screenshot, it makes sense to me. So visually speaking.
So from the perspective of being a developer or a user, like,
yes,
why would you choose one or the other? Like, what more do you get going with this Siri custom intents that can be given up, that can be donated as shortcuts, as opposed to just using NS user activity?
So here's what I think will happen. Lots of apps will use the NS user activity because it's built in. It's been available since iOS 8, and it makes sense to launch apps into specific screens. It's something that we've been doing for years with stuff like Launch Center Pro or Launcher. So I expect the adoption of an NS user activity type of basic shortcuts to be massive because it's so little work for developers. Mm-hmm. For SiriKit, I think the custom intent makes a lot of sense if you have information type stuff. If you want to show users something like a little piece of content without having to open the app, could be a hotel reservation, could be a restaurant reservation, could be a document, could be an image, could be anything. So I expect the informational type of response from Siri to be quite useful.
So would it be safe to assume that the example they were showing with Phil's Coffee, that was a custom intent?
I think so, yeah.
Because it had an image and you could press a button. Right.
Yeah,
okay.
and it says, I've ordered your coffee. So that's exactly, I think, one type of custom intent.
Okay.
Yeah.
Because it's also customizing the response.
Yes, exactly. So not only can you customize the image that you see in the little Siri snippet, you can also add buttons around the little custom UI, and you can customize what Siri says. So yeah.
What are we talking about with buttons here? Like,
buttons,
how
we're talking about confirm or
can
cancel.
these be? Right. Okay.
Is that it?
Yeah. You cannot have something like a calculator in a Siri snippet. So I'm sorry, James, but you cannot bring Picalc to Siri.
Huh.
Yeah. I'm sure he thought about it, but that's
he
not possible.
did. I actually spoke to him. He asked, and they said no. It's like, no, you cannot do that.
Even though, and I wanted to say that even though Apple is sort of reusing SiriKit, it's not like every single SiriKit action should make sense as a shortcut. Again, Apple is stressing the idea of shortcuts should be something that users want to access frequently. So if you send a one-time payment to Myke over Venmo or PayPal, maybe that's not a shortcut because you've done it one time in a year. But if you send it like on a weekly basis, then maybe that should be a shortcut. So ultimately, it's up to developers to figure out what should be a shortcut. And that's why Apple is basically saying, if you think that this activity, this action that a user does should be a shortcut, you should have a little button that says add to Siri so that the users can make a custom shortcut and have a custom phrase for it. But otherwise, it's up to the system to figure out with the machine learning stuff that Apple is saying they're using, with the predictive system that they have to say, even though you haven't added a custom phrase, maybe you should see this little shortcut to order pizza on Tuesday in your spotlight screen. So it's a fascinating twofold approach here of you can either have a custom phrase because the user decided to make this action a shortcut, or you can let the system predict it for you. I want to see how it will play out because like right now, I don't have a lot of faith in the predictive type stuff.
Yeah.
But also I gotta see what happens when I'm actually using iOS 12 for like a month and when I have 50 apps that offer shortcuts to the system. Will it scale? Will it actually understand my habits? We'll see. I have a lot more faith in the custom phrase approach because it's something that I create, something that I want to use.
Yeah, I mean, and maybe it's limited just because I work from home, but I feel like the stuff it's doing now to predict stuff, it doesn't seem super relevant to me. And again, maybe that's because I have a lack of structure. Like if I went to the same office and the same coffee shop every day, maybe it would work better. But for me, I'm kind of the same boat as you are. Like I want to see how it works, but I feel like I'm going to be using the custom voice triggers a lot more than things that it suggests to me.
Yeah, I agree.
So I have a conceptual question, really. Because I've been thinking about this. All of the shortcuts, the suggested shortcuts, and the way that people can build shortcuts in the app, is this a good thing or a bad thing for developers? Because especially if you have a large company, right? You have a pretty large user base. You have an application that is pretty big in nature. Surely the company wants their users to be opening the application and using it and seeing everything that the app has to offer, promoting new features, that kind of stuff. Like, do developers, do companies want to be relegated to being just a set of features rather than offering their overall experience? Which, no matter how we may view it, every large company believes that the experience that they offer is better than anything else available, right? Like, otherwise, what are they doing, So what do you think about that? Do you think that this might be a thing that holds some developers off because they don't want to be just relegated to like Lego blocks?
It doesn't make sense for companies like Twitter and Facebook that want you to open the app and see ads and contribute to their statistics. I would be surprised if these big companies have tons of shortcuts. Because as you mentioned, like it will give people a way to accomplish the same functionality without having to open the app. Also because, of course, Apple is being extremely serious with their privacy approach here. These extensions run in a secure process. Just the information that you need is exchanged between Siri and the extension. If Facebook had a way to bring up a user profile in Siri, maybe I wouldn't navigate to a friend's profile page in the Facebook app, and I'm not sure if Facebook wants that. But if you're a smaller company that is not creepy and doesn't make money off of people's attention that way, it makes sense to integrate with Siri because you can it's a good thing to have if you care about the native iOS experience. And also if we consider the custom shortcuts, which is and the shortcuts app, and I believe that the people who put together advanced workflows and stuff will be a tiny fraction of the folks who are using the basic shortcuts with Siri. You will still have to open apps. You will still have to open Ulysses if you want to add something to your to a document. Because as I mentioned in the story, the SiriKit integrations will not be able to replace, at least in the first version, the more advanced features of existing URL scheme actions. So we're stuck in this situation where big companies will probably not want to have really deep Siri integrations. I would love to be surprised and see Twitter and Facebook going, and Instagram having full integrations with SiriKit and shortcuts. But then if we're looking at the more niche type of apps, the productivity stuff on iOS, you will still have to launch apps and open apps because URL schemes and Xcallback will still be more flexible than SiriKit, at least for now. In the future, I hope not. But for now, you will still have to open them if you want to do crazy automations.
Do you think that is a problem for people who want to get started with this? Do you think that's like a hurdle that they're going to have to figure out?
So based on what I've seen so far, I think there's a really nice path, starting with simple shortcuts and suggested shortcuts, whether it's in the Spotlight page or the lock screen, and going to the more custom automation stuff. Honestly, I believe that if you already know workflow, there will be little to no learning curve in switching to shortcuts. But if you're new to this stuff, if you've never done automation before, I think it's done well enough in the sense that you swipe down to search for an app, which is something that most people do, and you will see suggestions and you will see shortcuts. I'm not sure if hiding the custom phrase stuff in settings is a good idea, because you need to open settings, navigate to Siri and search, and then view the shortcuts. Maybe there could have been a way to make that stand out a little more.
Well, I would guess that they're hoping that that Apple won't need to be who shows you it, right? Like the app,
right.
The third-party apps will show you with the buttons that they've made.
That's the hope, yeah. So I was about to say that maybe they're just hoping that apps will bring up these Siri UIs and you won't have to open settings. If that's the case, then I think that it should be quite easy for people to get started. Because if you're using Yelp, or I'm trying to think of iOS apps that actually do adopt features. I don't know. Yelp is a good example. Instagram, I don't know. Telegram is a good example. If you're using these apps and you see Siri shortcut buttons, and you will say, "Oh, what's this?" and you will understand the potential for custom phrases, then maybe you will start using them. And also swiping down, and also notifications on the lock screen. I think it should be enough, but again, it depends on what developers do. Because it's hard to explain to people the concept of automation, which is why I think it's clever that Apple is doing this more lightweight version of shortcuts, in that you don't have to put together a workflow for everything, but the system can suggest you basic actions. I think that's a clever choice.
So I think one thing that has me potentially excited about this is that Siri is more than just on my phone, right? It's on my watch, and of course it's on my HomePod. How can you tell so far that this stuff is going to be surfaced on those other devices? Can I walk into my office and just shout to my HomePod and things happen? Is it going to be a limited set? Do you have any feel for that yet?
It's a good question. So you will be able to access your custom phrases for shortcuts on the HomePod using personal requests. So it will be part of that. The problem here, which is actually a little mini section in the story, is the ability, and this is a problem, of course, for basic shortcuts, for custom shortcuts, the ability for a shortcut to execute both visually, so if you have an iPhone, if you have an iPad, and in an audio-only environment. This is actually one of the features that the workflow team was working on, being able to have the same workflow, but making it run in a bunch of different places. So Workflow used to have an Apple Watch app. Shortcuts doesn't anymore. But they also used to have a widget. And the widget was actually this really important piece of technology because it allowed you to run entire workflows in the background without having to open the Workflow app unless you came across an action that required an interaction that couldn't be built into the widget, such as typing text, because Apple doesn't want you to type text with the keyboard into widgets. And the idea with shortcuts and the Apple Watch and CarPlay and the HomePod is essentially the same. How can you make the same shortcut work everywhere? So for app shortcuts, I'm not sure how developers will be able to confirm actions without having a UI. So if I want to order a coffee, will I be able to use it both on my iPhone, where I can see the little restaurant snippet menu and a button that says confirm? Will I be able to do the same on the Apple Watch and on the HomePod? I'm not sure yet. What I'm pretty confident about is that if you put together a custom shortcut, so a workflow, and you have actions such as choose from list or ask for input, stuff that requires you on iOS to type text or choose from a list of items or choose from a menu, you will not be able to have that in the first version of shortcuts when a shortcut is running via Siri. Because my understanding is that Siri, at least in the first version of iOS 12, will not have the ability to say, oh, here's a list of items in your shortcut, choose one of them. Or usually here you would type some text, but now you can just speak it to me. So it will not be interactive like that. So to answer your question, will I be able to walk into my office and shout things to the HomePod? It depends on the shortcut that you want to run. If it can be executed via audio only, then yes. If it requires you to interact with the shortcut in some way, it'll probably tell you to continue on your iPhone. As for right now, you can set up custom phrases. You can ask the HomePod to execute one of them, but it will give you an error because I think it needs an update. So at least that's what happened with my 3 HomePods.
Okay.
None of them wanted to run my custom shortcuts, which makes sense because it's, the system, people are actually seeing all these workflows show up in the settings. I'm pretty sure that's actually a bug because workflow hasn't been updated for iOS 12, and there's an API for iOS 12 only, which dictates how and when user activities show up in settings under shortcuts. So it depends, Stephen, on what you want to do with your HomePod.
So you mentioned in your article that you're very confident that you will be able to bring over all of your existing workflows and they'll basically be unchanged when it moves over to shortcuts. So I wondered, as far as you're aware, will it be possible for me to take an existing workflow and add new shortcuts to it? Is this stuff going to be able to be mixed and matched between? Can I use the old, more complicated versions and functionality with the new functionality?
So the idea is that all your workflows will just migrate over to the new format, and because shortcuts will have the same actions, will have the same features, it'll mostly look the same. I mean, we've seen the screenshots. The idea is that once you have all your old workflows into shortcuts, there won't be any difference between the old ones and the new ones. So yes, you will be able to add all of the new actions that shortcuts will offer. Because what I understood is that Apple doesn't want to end up in a situation where all the workflow users are upset because they lost a bunch of functionality in the transition to shortcuts. And that's great news because it means that not only are we getting new system features, but also we can keep the old ones and we can live happily ever after, ideally.
Best I love you.
That's the best I love you timeline. So yes, I don't know I'm not sure if shortcuts will replace workflow on the App Store, so you'll just basically update the app and you have shortcuts, or if it will be a separate app and there will be some kind of feature or tool to move over your old workflows. I would be surprised if shortcuts kept the same old workflow sync account mechanism. I'm pretty sure it's going to move to iCloud. So that said, it could be an update or it could be a new version, but I think, and I'm pretty confident actually that nothing should break. At least that's what I've been hearing recently. But we'll have to see, of course, once there's a beta and once Shortcuts launches sometime in September, I assume.
One last question for you. So when creating these custom shortcuts in the Shortcuts app, do you have any idea if it will be possible? So, like, for example, I can create shortcuts for many, many, many activities, right? Like, and I need to go into individual applications to surface all of the different things that I can create shortcuts for, Siri shortcuts for. Do you know of any sense that if I'm in the Shortcuts app, will I be able to surface these? Or do I need to, like, find them all first? Do you follow what I'm saying? Like,
yep.
In the old workflow, you had a list of everything workflow could do. Is that going to be the same with shortcuts?
Yes.
Because that's big. That could be a lot of stuff, right?
Yeah. You will see. Again, this is my understanding right now. You will see both the new native app shortcuts or Siri shortcuts and the old apps category with the URL scheme stuff.
Every action that is donated to the system to become a Siri shortcut will show in the Shortcuts app.
Yes.
Wow.
Yes.
What's interesting about that is it's very big and can be very varied depending on the user.
Is there any sort of privacy angle there? Like, does it sync that NS user records across iCloud? So, like, if someone picked up my iPad, they could see everything I'm doing on my phone, because those records are like breadcrumbs on what you're doing across a bunch of different apps.
So I don't think that information syncs with iCloud because that is just exposed to the system. What syncs with iCloud, I think, is when you add a custom phrase to a shortcut. But just like your iPad doesn't know which apps you have installed on your phone, I mean, unless you use screen time, which maybe also it kind of does. Apple is doing some new things this year with keeping track of a user's installed apps. I mean, I'm sure everything will be encrypted, but especially if you consider screen time, where it's not like you have a separate instance of screen time for iPhone and screen time for iPad, then the iPad already kind of knows which apps you're using on the phone. Then maybe the answer is, I don't know, because Apple must be keeping track of these things somewhere. I don't think that workflow on the iPad will say, hey, I know that you have OpenTable on your iPhone. Why don't you put OpenTable here as well? I don't think that will happen. But again, screen time is a precedent in this case, so I'm not sure. Myke,
I think with iOS 12, there are a bunch of areas where it's like a local privacy thing, and it can be a problem depending on your situation, right? That both screen time and Siri shortcuts, they're going to start surfacing things, and you know, if people pick up your devices, then yes, they will be able to learn new things about you. And as of all of this stuff, right, like when we're talking about the sharing of a Touch ID or whatever, that's just going to be on you and your home situation as to whether you're cool with that or not, I guess.
Right. Yeah. There's a couple of details that I need to mention to answer your question, Myke. The first one is that actually app integrations or app shortcuts in the Shortcuts app, this is super confusing. The Siri shortcuts will have a toggle on them that says show and run, so that you can choose to actually see the little Siri UI or not if you're running the shortcut in Siri, for example. And if show and run is disabled, Siri will just execute the action and breeze through, move on to the next step.
So not even needing to open applications anymore, right?
No, because Siri, it's all done in the background.
Damn.
Unless, the user activity stuff, if you say, take me to this page in OpenTable, then of course you will have to launch the app.
There's nothing it can do.
But if it's a SiriKit intent, it will just run in the background. Also, the big catch, maybe, is that these Siri shortcuts, these native actions, are not as customizable as what we have today with X callback in workflow. Meaning that shortcuts are offered by apps as they are. They won't have custom fields in them when you add them to a shortcut. So, for example, today in workflow, you can say add to things. That's an action. And when you add this action to a workflow, you have a bunch of fields that you can fill yourself, such as title or due date. That will not be possible with Siri shortcuts in the first version in iOS 12, because these shortcuts are effectively pre-made. They're not user customizable. They shouldn't accept any custom input. They will not set any custom output. And if you actually take a look at the screenshots shared by Apple, they are not connected to any other action. So the vertical line that runs through a workflow or a custom shortcut stops when it runs through a native shortcut. Because again, they are little standalone entities that are not like the current X callback actions. So that, I think, is of course the next big step, right? Of being able to have intents that are actually user customizable. And at that point, and Steven is gonna maybe hate me or love me for saying this, what's the difference with HyperCard, really, where you have a program that gives you a little UI that you can customize and make your own? Right now, SiriKit intents are just extensions offered by developers.
I'm just proud that you know what HyperCard is. But I think that's why this stuff is so exciting. It's the same reason that like HyperCard was exciting, and the same reason that Automator was exciting, because it brings like these are, I know we've quabbled over this term over the years, but these are like intro to development type tasks, right? Like learning how a computer can do things on its own is the first step in development. And you may not make it past that first step. I surely haven't. I'm not a developer, but I can automate stuff. And this coming to iOS is a huge step down the road of, is iOS like, are iOS devices computers? And I know not the way you think about them, not the way I think about them, but like in the broadest sense, having a device that you can develop on is a really big milestone in the lifetime of a platform. And this is another step down that road. And that's why it's so exciting, because for the first time, it's from Apple, right? It's not like these crazy workflow guys building this amazing tool from the outside. Now the automation is coming from inside the house. Like they are in the system, they are in Siri, and that's a huge step forward. So I think comparing it to something like HyperCard or Automator, or even the terminal to a degree, I think that's fine, because it's an important step in the evolution of a platform.
Cool. So you love me for saying that.
I do. Best I love you.
Okay. Thank you. All right.
So before we move on from this, there's just a couple of things I just want to run through super quick that were just small details from the article, which were exciting to me. The share extension, URL schemes, and the widget will remain. Action
extension. People are going to correct you. So, yeah.
Yeah, the action extension and the share sheet.
Yes.
HomeKit support is added, which is amazing. There was one thing that I thought of. I don't know if I mentioned this on the show or not, but it's kind of cool. Like even apps, even like devices that aren't HomeKit devices could in theory work with all of this stuff. Because they could just surface a shortcut, which I think is also kind of cool. Show result is it that you're excited about? Show result, right? What is that?
It's one of the new actions that should make it in the Shortcuts app. It's a way to show result in Siri. And the beautiful thing about this action is that you can mix and match plain text and magic variables. So you can define your own custom response in Siri, and when the shortcut runs, it'll assemble the variables and it'll show you the results. I think that's a fantastic idea.
Show result also be read out loud on the HomePod?
Yeah. Yeah.
Interesting. No dictation of text into this stuff. So the idea would being, we go right the way back to the beginning of the show. You can't say like it's the idea is you can't dictate a result before or after you give a shortcut command. So you can't say like add a new task to Todoist that says blah 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 blah. That's two separate actions, right?
The idea would be that if you have a shortcut with a custom phrase, you cannot mix and match the custom phrase with some other words because those words will not be treated as input by the shortcut. What I want to see is Workflow has a dictate text action that brings up the native dictation UI on iOS. What happens if you use dictate text and you ask Siri to run a custom shortcut? Will it just fall back into just tell me? And I will take, I'm actually doing the dictation for you, or will it say you need to use your iPhone for that? So we'll see what happens there.
Fingers crossed on that one. And Play Media. What does Play Media entail?
So Play Media is this new intent for SiriKit, which in theory should allow radio apps, podcast apps, and music apps, even though some people on Twitter disagree because they said that Apple is making this just for radio and podcasts.
Long form, right?
Yeah. It should allow background playback for third-party audio sources. Now, in their demos, Apple showed The Daily, so a podcast that was using this intent. Shows up as a shortcut. You can ask Siri. You can make a custom shortcut with these actions. But the big question is, do developers need to create need to ask users to create the shortcut? I don't think you will be able to say, Siri, play my Overcast podcast, play connected episode 200 in Overcast. You will probably have to create a custom phrase yourself first inside Overcast. So if Marco decides to support shortcuts in Overcast, there could be a button in your queue that says add your queue to Siri, and then you will have a shortcut for your Overcast queue. I don't think this will be an intent in the sense of like Todoist or Things, for example, where you can just say anything you want and it'll work. I think you will have to add the custom phrase first, but I'm not sure because there's basically no documentation for this. If you open the Play Media intent page on developer.apple.com, it's empty. Just a bunch of API names. There's no descriptions, no guidelines, no nothing.
They forgot.
So, yeah, it's I would love to have some clarification on this, actually. If it applies to music apps, does it mean that Spotify can use this? Ideally, I saw there in the API there's support for artwork and track names. That should be enough for a music app, but again, I don't know. So it's unclear.
I just find myself getting increasingly more excited about this the more I find out, and it's usually the other way around, right? Like usually you find out about something and then you think about it, you get really excited, and then you find out the limitations. But all of the limitations, they're not off-putting to me because all of the limitations are not limiting anything I could do before. So everything that we're getting is just added stuff. Like I find myself just becoming more and more excited about this the more we find out about it. Mm-hmm. Oh boy, please, just Apple, come on, give us the Shortcuts app. Just give us it.
Give us the beta. Just put up a beta. Either test flight or make it built in and then remove it for the final release. It's fine. This is the perfect app that needs a beta with 5,000, 10,000 people. It's the perfect beta testing scenario. So,
it needs to be tested. Like developers need to be able to test that their stuff is going to work. Like I'm very confident they will do it. I just want it to happen really quickly.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah.
All right, but it's not all iOS on this show. We should talk about macOS Dark Mode. But before we do, let me thank our final sponsor for this week, and that is our friends at Casper, the company focused on sleep, dedicated to making you exceptionally comfortable one night at a time. You spend a third of your life sleeping, so shouldn't it be the best it could possibly be? That is why you need a Casper mattress, because their mattresses are perfectly designed for humans. They have engineering that has been thoughtfully considered and also very lovingly made to support and soothe your natural geometry. It's got all the right support in all the right places. So what goes into making a Casper mattress so dang comfortable? Well, they combine multiple supportive memory foams for a quality mattress with just the right sink and bounce. Casper mattresses are designed and developed in the US, and their breathable design helps to regulate your body temperature throughout the night. They have over 20,000 reviews online with an average rating of 4.8 stars. Casper is very quickly becoming the internet's favorite mattress, and it's easy to see why. You could be sure of their purchase with Casper's 100-night risk-free trial. So they have a sleep on it trial, 100 nights. You can have the mattress in your home. You can sleep on it in your pajamas, with your linen, with everything. You can just take your time with it and make your decision. You don't have to rush into this with Casper. They deliver directly to your door, and if for any reason you don't love it, they have a hassle-free return policy. Now, Stephen, you were traveling this week. Was it a great experience to return to your Casper mattress?
It was. I stayed at an Airbnb, and I think we've all had this experience where you're sleeping someplace that's not your home, and the mattress is just terrible. Like, it was a great spot, but the mattress was like soft and like you're sinking down into it, and then you wake up hot, right? Because you're like slowly being absorbed,
surrounded by mattress.
Yeah, no one wants that. And I live in the South. It's hot. I came home 20 degrees hotter than it was at WWDC, but it was fine. I slept great because the Casper keeps you in just the right place with that memory foam. It's really great. Come back to it.
You can get $50 towards select mattress purchases by going to casper.com/connected and using connected at checkout. Terms and conditions apply. That is casper.com/connected and the offer code connected for $50 off select mattresses. Our thanks to Casper for their support of this show. So, Stephen, will you please wax lyrical about the next version of macOS's dark mode? I don't remember the name. Like, I don't know what's wrong with me. I have like a spot in my brain.
Come on, you can do it. Come on.
Was it Mojave?
No.
Oh, gosh.
It's a long E. Mojave.
Because I constantly second guess myself. This is the problem.
Yeah.
I don't know how long this is going to take.
Well, you got a year. Then it'll be gone.
No, because then it'll be just like High Mojave or something like that. I don't know.
Sandy Mojave. So this dark mode is really part 2 of something that was introduced back in 2014 with Yosemite, talked about earlier in the show. Yosemite came with a dark theme, and that has continued to be the case until today. I run it on all my Macs, and it makes the menu bar and the dock and a couple other things dark. But it's not anywhere close to being a cohesive experience. All the window UIs and everything are still bright. But, the menu bar and the dock are along the edges of the screens. And my iMac Pro has these ridiculous bezels of black glass that are like 4 inches wide. So it helps kind of settle things in. And I've used it since it came out. This, though, is something far different. It is much more than just a reskin of the menu bar and the dock. It actually, every system window, every control has been revisited. It is very thorough. Even in the first beta, it's hard to find places where it's broken or where, Apple forgot about that corner of the OS. Like, there are things within apps, like iTunes is sort of hilariously broken, but I assume the iTunes team wasn't brought into this very recently, so I have no doubt that they will.
Is there an iTunes team?
Yeah, like the intern.
What?
I'm sure the intern will get right on that. And no, they'll get their app tuned up, and I think by the time this launches, anything that comes with macOS will be polished and ready to go. There are a couple of things here that are interesting. Apple calls this an appearance. They don't call it a theme. In the sessions, in the OS, in the documentation, it is an appearance.
What's the difference?
I don't really know. I just think it's interesting that they're really really stuck on that word. That's actually a word that like Apple has used in the past. Like macOS 8 had like an appearance manager, and maybe it's just because it's an Apple-y word they just used it, but they're very consistent with it. And there's kind of like 3 tenets that they spoke about. They say dark interfaces are cool, which is, can't argue with that. Dark interfaces are not just inverted versions. So in my article, I inverted a screenshot of High Sierra, and boy, it looks bad.
We were playing around with it as well, where it was quite funny to put things into dark mode and then invert.
Yeah,
that looked real weird.
It's not great. That is an accessibility option. There are people who that is super helpful for, but it's not the way to build like a true dark appearance. The last point they talk about in the sessions is that dark mode is content focused, and we all remember that from like iOS 7 and then later Yosemite of like, oh, the window treatment it just gets out of the way and your content is front and center, blah, all that sort of thinking is present here. And it kind of works. Like there's a reason things like Final Cut and Logic have dark modes, because when you're working in content creation apps, you want the UI to sort of fade back and you can really see your content. And they've brought that to everything from the Finder to system preferences to photos. It's just everywhere. And I think it works. Like you look at these screenshots, I have my laptop in front of me running dark mode, and like it's sort of a nice calming effect. I actually kind of really like it. And it really makes it sort of where the window Chrome and the content of that window are separate things. And so I think they've sort of nailed that aspect of it.
There's a screenshot in your article on 512 Pixels where you show Mail with its compose screen, and the compose screen is white.
Yes.
That looks weird.
I don't think that looks very
No.
good. I don't like that.
Yeah, me neither.
That seems like a peculiar choice to me.
So that is an option. So Mail has this option, and I haven't really found it anywhere else, but it's part of the API. It's part of like the API stuff that if the system is in dark aqua, which is what they call it, some apps can, if developers opt into this, they can have a setting to say, use dark mode, respect what the system is telling me to do, but in my content areas, keep it a white background. So Mail by default, everything is dark. If you're in dark mode, I set this to show it in a screenshot. And you're right. It's super weird and it's really bright. But, something like Mail, maybe that's helpful if you're,
I guess if you want to see how it's going to look in the recipient's inbox, right? You would want it to be white still, I guess.
Or you get a newsletter, right? And they haven't set a background, like all sorts of crazy things. Mail is just the Wild West. So it's in Mail. It is in the APIs. In the new Cocoa stuff, so it could be there in other apps. I only found it in Mail so far, but it's.
Do you know if Safari has a dark mode API for websites to hook into? Do you know if anything like that exists?
If it does exist, I haven't found it yet. That I think is conjecture at this point. That so say Mac Stories is a good example of this because I haven't gotten around to it.
Yep.
Mac Stories has a light and a dark mode, and you can set it, and it sets a cookie, I guess, and it remembers that.
No, it's not a cookie, but yeah.
It's Federico hand checks it every time you visit the website.
Yeah, every request goes to Federico, and he says dark or light,
I'm
and he just
manually
remembers
approving it. Yeah, no, it's actually something called local storage in Safari, but yeah, it's mostly the same idea.
He's installing a Flash-based player on your system, and that remembers
malware
if it's light or dark.
TT malware.
Yes. That is why Apple is now notarizing apps.
Yeah,
that was
because of you.
Yeah. So what this could do is WebKit could ask, or the system could tell WebKit, "Hey, you're in dark mode." Then it could load, a different set of CSS depending on, the apparent set by the user. I think that'd be great because the second you start browsing websites in Mojave in dark mode, like your eyeballs explode because. Yeah. Most websites are brightly colored. Actually, the Relay site looks really awesome with all the colors we use. But
because we dark moded already. That's the phrase, by the way, dark moded.
But something like 512 pixels looks out of place, and so that's something I'm going to address. But
I'm excited about the possibility of all of the websites that I visit getting dark modes because I prefer that anyway. I've used the Mac Stories dark mode since the beginning, and it's what I have on all my devices. When I go on a new device and it's white, I'm like, Mac Stories is broken.
Yeah.
So that's a funny thing to me.
No CSS.
Also, Dark Aqua. That's a good name.
Yeah. So
I like that.
In NS Appearance, it's Aqua and Dark Aqua are the two names.
Dark Aqua sounds like the name of a metal band from the 90s.
Or like
I was going to say emo. But metal's good too.
Yeah. They're just singing songs about macOS interface, but they're all really sad about it.
Sad water.
Yeah. There are a couple of things I think that are worth touching on. There's something called vibrancy, and this has been around really since like iOS 7. It came to the Mac in Yosemite, and if you look at the screenshots, or if you use a Mac now, the most common place to this is the sidebar in Finder, where it picks up the background colors and sort of shines through, but sort of in a very like translucent way. So in my screenshot on my really bad red and blue example wallpapers, you could see the sidebar.
I genuinely cannot believe that this is still around. Like, it boggles my mind. Like, I can't honestly, like, it just seems ugly to me. Like,
I don't like it.
That transparency. I don't know who's using it. Cue tweets for everyone who's using it, but still, I just like. It surprises me that people leave that on when you can turn it off.
I run in reduced transparency because I don't really care for the vibrancy, but it's still there. And in dark mode, it does what you think it would do. But there's also something called desktop tinting. It's only present in dark mode, and what it does is it affects the color temperature of the gray. So if you have system preferences over a red background, it's a little bit warmer, it's a little bit pinker. But if you have it over a blue background, blue wallpaper, it is cooler and a little bit bluer. And it is very subtle, and I really don't think the screenshots do it justice. If you see it in person, you can really tell if you're kind of tuned into that thing. But that's there across the board in dark mode. And in the keynote there, or in the sessions, like, well, we don't want the gray to like contrast with your wallpaper. Like, no one's ever going to see it. Like, it's fine. But it's there.
But
and
don't worry, we'll let the wallpaper shine through, though.
That's right.
Okay.
So it's there. So that's new. This is not just they just moved all the sliders over in Photoshop and re-released it. There is some new technology kind of putting these appearances together now.
Now, there is something called accent colors, which I genuinely cannot believe is shipping even in beta, because it leads to some very peculiar color choices.
Yes, it
right?
does.
Like, what is going on with accent color?
Yeah, so this is a new thing in macOS. So you have appearance, which is light mode or dark mode. That used to be blue and graphite, so they've reused that name a little bit. And there's the highlight color, which is the default is blue, and that is what you see. Like if you're in Chrome or Safari and you highlight the URL, that color that is the highlight, that's highlight color. So you can change that from blue to pink to gray to orange or whatever. There's a bunch of options in there. That's been there forever. What's new is accent color. So before, when you were either in blue or graphite appearance, like if you had a drop down, the right side of the drop down would be blue double arrows, and it would switch to graphite if you were in the graphite mode, which is the one I've used for a long time. In Mojave, you have 8 accent colors. So you have blue, red, orange, yellow, green, purple, pink, and graphite. And so that changes those colors. So if you have a drop down, you can set it to pink, or you can set it to orange, or you can set it to green. And it lets you customize macOS in a way that you have never been able to do since the OS X transition. Like, this is more customization than we've ever seen, post 2001 or so. But it can lead to some really weird combinations. Like, I kind of thought that I would like dark mode with the orange highlight because I like gray and black and orange together, but it doesn't look great. But on the other hand, I really like the way light mode and the pink highlight color looks. Like, it's kind of airy and fresh in a way that's sort of nice. So you can really customize it. There's some weird combinations you can do. I think the green and the yellow look bad all the time. Like, they're too bright or like they're too vibrant, but they're there and you can play with them. With the last one, graphite has a few tricks up its sleeve. So if you set the accent color to graphite, then you get those gray window controls. So the stoplights, instead of red, yellow, green, are just gray, like they are in graphite now. The other 7 retain the red, yellow, green stoplight look. So if you like your window controls being all gray, you have to use the graphite highlight accent color. Graphite accent is also supposed to disable desktop tinting. So what we talked about earlier, where the color temperature of the dark mode changes based on your wallpaper. This accent, graphite accent, is supposed to disable that. It doesn't seem to be working in the first developer beta. I'm sure they'll get that fixed. But in the sessions, I believe they said, if you're in graphite, we're just going to give you a flat gray. We're not going to tint it. So graphite is a little more subdued. And like the dark mode in the graphite accent really looks subdued. It's really flat. It really sort of fades away. I think it's a really professional, nice look. But it's one that I'm not sure everyone's gonna love. I think a lot of people are gonna want the multicolored stoplights.
Yeah, I like graphite and have been using that forever.
Mm-hmm.
So I don't know why. I just said it once and then left it. So tell me, how easy is it for an app to switch over? Like, is Apple doing anything to turn apps dark mode on their own, or developers have to do something?
So you've got to build your app against the 10.14 SDK. If you use any images, like static images for buttons or UI, that those are going to need to be addressed, especially if if they don't have transparency on them. So like if you have a button image that has a background and that background's invisible normally because of the way the UI is built, that's going to be visible now because the UI behind you might change colors and then your button is kind of floating on top with its border. So there's stuff like that you've got to do. Apple also is encouraging developers to not necessarily use fixed colors in their user interfaces. If you have so if you're like Overcast, you have a branded orange, right? That's fine. But if you are just a regular Mac app, you're just using, reds and greens and blues to denote different things in your UI. Apple wants you to use the system colors for that. Their system calls, like use system UI red, system UI orange, or whatever. And if you do that, those are slightly different between the light and dark appearances. And that means your app will feel more at home. It'll be more harmonious. It'll be less jarring as a user switches the modes or just operates in dark mode all the time. So none of that seems like crazy amounts of work to me. Again, I'm not a developer, so if it's crazy amounts of work for your Mac app, I'm sorry. But Apple's pitching it at least to be like, it's not a big deal. Like if you've been building Mac apps in the modern way, then yeah, it's going to be a little bit of work, but you're not having to like blow up your UI and start completely from scratch. And I think that's good because I think that a lot of people are going to use this. And I think if your Mac app doesn't conform to it or doesn't do a good job of it, then you're going to stick out like a sore thumb.
And I guess, there are going to be apps that aren't going to be updated, but it looks like for any app that receives any kind of attention, recently, you're going to be okay.
Yeah, I think that's true for all this stuff. Like if you were keeping up and you were building your app against each new release and taking advantage of what they're telling you to do, then it's not the end of the world when something big comes down the pipe.
And it's only like how on iOS you'll see like a far too large keyboard for a while, right?
Yeah.
It's stuff like that.
Yeah, your app's not going to break,
I have one last question for you, actually, because I've seen people talking about this, and Apple's website isn't very clear. Is there a way to have dark mode apply automatically at night?
If there is, it is not currently exposed in system preferences with the other stuff. There may be a way to do it on the command line. There may be a way coming, but they did not discuss it in the sessions, best I can tell.
But what if you have that thing, because there's a desktop that wallpaper that changes, right? And that doesn't change it to dark mode?
I don't think it does, because right now I have that desktop set and it hasn't changed it back to light mode. So
okay,
I may be wrong, but best I can tell, that is not the case. The only way to change it is to go in there and change it yourself. Now, that said, night shift is part of dark mode, and it's really bizarre. Like, it feels like dark mode is brighter the later in the day you get, because it warms it up, and it's sort of a weird effect. I'm not sure if there's more fine-tuning to do there, or I'm just not used to it yet, because I've been using night shift on the Mac for a while now in the regular appearance. So my gut says they're still like fine-tuning that in dark mode, and I think it will improve. But it's a little weird right now. It's still, it does the temperature shifting correctly, but in doing so, it looks a little strange in places.
Interesting. Yeah, I could see that. Because, like, in theory, you might not need night shift to affect the dark mode stuff in any way, right?
Yeah.
All right. Have you got anything else you wanted to add on this?
No, I think that's it. I think that's a pretty comprehensive look. If you want to see more or see a bunch of screenshots, there's a blog post in the Ye Olde show notes.
Which you can find where, Stephen? Wrap us up.
So show notes this week, relay.fm/connected/197. Getting so close to that 200 mark. So all the stuff we talked about is there. Tickets for our New York show. Come out and see us. All that stuff is there. There's an email link there. You can send us an email with feedback, or you can do it on Twitter, like most people do. You can find Myke there as IMYKE, and Myke is the host of a bunch of shows on Relay. So if you like this podcast, I bet there's a bunch of other stuff on Relay FM that you would enjoy. You can find Federico on Twitter as VITICCI, and he's the editor-in-chief of MacStories.net, which has, as we talked about, a dark mode. So you can read it in the dark and not wake up your loved ones, not melt your eyeballs. You can find me on Twitter as ISMH, and I write at 512pixels.net. And until next time, gentlemen, say goodbye.
Arrivederci.
Cheerio.
Adios.